Good evening and welcome to another week of Overtime here on WOTM. I am Gerhard Mathangani, joined by our expert historian / researcher, Mark Everett Kelly. Mark, there's obviously been a lot of developments over the weekend in several different sports, and we'll talk about a multitude of them, including the College World Series, where we saw some interest and some drama. We also saw a lot of interest and drama at the NBA playoffs, and we also have some news to pass along with the Olympics as it relates to athletes with ties to the state of Alabama. But first, we'll start with the Atlanta Braves. And the Braves are a team that really, for the most part, all year long, I think at the beginning of the year, especially in April and May, you could call it kind of a, we've seen some good, we've seen some bad, and they'll find a way to get over it. And I feel like the deeper that we get into every month, and now here we are at the end of June, we keep saying this about the Atlanta Braves, and they keep not being able to kind of get over that hump. We saw it again this past week. 4 games against the Reds, won 2, lost 2 after their series against the Mets before then. So you have a non-division opponent and a division opponent, and still not really to chew on as we get closer and closer to the All-Star break.
Well, you see a team like Cincinnati, so the Braves really should beat up upon.
Yeah.
Now, I know they have Winker and they have Castellanos, who have had outstanding years offensively. They are 1-2 in the National League in a lot of categories. So those guys have been solid producers all year. But with the Braves, what you saw early in the year was their pitching struggle, especially their starting pitching not going deep enough into the games, which was lending to their bullpen being overexposed and pitching a lot more than they needed to. As we've moved on in the last couple months, the starting pitching has gotten a lot better. They've started to go a little bit longer, especially Charlie Morton. The last 2 starts has been outstanding. Kyle Muller, the last 2 starts has been outstanding, a young pitcher. But they lost Tucker Davidson, a guy that they were depending on, a young left-hander who looked really good. He's got some forearm tightness, and they just want to be careful with him. So they put him from the 10-day DL into the 60-day DL. He'll probably be back in August. He's going to be a key guy for them to depend on down the stretch. But their offense going into June was among the league leaders in home runs and was among the league leaders in runs scored. And in June, they've had a significant drop-off for both. You could see in runs scored, they went from averaging 4.7 runs per game in May to averaging just 4 runs per game in June. And home runs, they only have 28 this month, where they had 43 last month. And their power numbers were drastically different. Ozuna being out is a large part of that.
That's right.
And not being able to replace him has been a large part of that. But if you look at their outfield numbers during this last week, Acuna's been a key factor all year. He's been consistent. He's their best player. When he doesn't hit, they're going to struggle. He didn't hit this week. Only 3 for 18, 3 runs scored, 2 RBIs. Inciarte's really struggled this year. 4 for 19, only 1 run scored. Almonte and Heredia, guys that they need to step up to replace Ozuna, are not doing a job. Almonte especially 0 for 15 this week, only 1 run scored. And when the Braves aren't getting that type of consistency from their outfield, they're going to struggle to score runs.
Exactly. Let's take a look at those outfield numbers that you talked about. Overall, it's 11 of 64, 1 run, and overall 6 runs, 6 RBI. And I think most Braves fans actually felt really good about the outfield coming into this season. And now it's one of the points where you're getting some good play, especially out of Acuna, when you take a look overall, not just this past week, but not necessarily everybody all at the same time. I think you're kind of getting it more popcorn style than you are consistently.
Well, you also thought that you were going to have Pache, who you knew was a dominant guy in the postseason. Not dominant, but good enough during the postseason. A young guy that really produced for Atlanta and they're excited about. And that you were going to have Ozuna, who they signed to a big-time contract. And Ozuna got off to a slow start, then he was starting to pick it up, and no one anticipated what was going to happen to him. So that's a real shock for them. And they're still trying to figure out what to do, whether to go out and get a stopgap replacement or a long-term replacement, or just bring up a guy like Drew Borders, who you want to make sure he's ready. You don't want to have 2 young outfielders out there, and then Acuna, who might feel he's got to do too much, and instead of being the dominant hitter that he's been all year, all of a sudden start struggling like he did that last week and start trying to swing for home runs more and trying to really do more than he can. But the good thing about Atlanta's offense is that throughout the season, they've been one of the best teams. And this is one of those secondary statistics, one of those analytic statistics called exit velocity. The Braves are among the best, if not the best in the National League, 89.8, that means that the ball's coming off the bat 89.8 miles per hour consistently from their offense, which is the best in the National League. I'm not a huge analytics guy, but this is just another way to look at how good Atlanta's been as far as making solid contact. And led by Acuna and Albies, Freeman, these guys are all guys, Swanson, these guys are all guys, and Riley too, all guys that when they hit the ball hard. And then another thing called barrels, which is the ability to hit the ball on the right part of the bat. So a barrel is considered where you hit the ball perfectly.
Right.
Like the batted ball advance and where you hit the ball match perfectly. And the Braves are among the leaders of that too in the National League, right up there with the Giants, Cubs, and Reds. All teams that could score runs. So that's the good side of it, is that they're making good contact and that they're hitting the ball hard. Sometimes you don't get to hit the ball right at somebody, but you could see that there are a few weak spots in the lineup, especially in center field and left field, where if they don't address them, it doesn't matter that their whole team overall is hitting well. When you have guys coming up like Almonte going 0 for 15 in a week and leaving guys on base, and then Acuna not being able to pick up like he normally does, 3 for 18, that's going to cause them to lose some games. If you looked at the Mets series specifically, you can't get angry when they lose to DeGrom. That guy's great, okay?
Best in the game.
Right. But there was a game, the second game of the doubleheader, where they were lucky to get away with a win. I mean, they had a 1-0 lead. The Mets left guys all over the place. Probably the worst base running I've seen since I got thrown out 8 times trying to stretch a double into triple in MLB 21. But it was just really bad.
Yeah.
And the Mets had a chance to win the game in the seventh inning, couldn't, and the Braves kind of got out of that one. Then they win Game 3, and then under Charlie Morton pitched great. And then Game 4, they don't get the 3 out of 4 from the Mets that you really would want to see them get to keep that nail in the Mets. Because the one thing you don't want the Mets to do is get some kind of confidence that they can play with Atlanta. Because knowing this rivalry, they haven't been able to play with Atlanta for a while.
Exactly.
And the rare seasons when they did, it was more because the Braves just weren't good enough, not because the Mets were so good.
Exactly. Last thing we'll look at is the pitching comparison between the starters and the bullpen. This was a narrative that we talked about beforehand, about how the bullpen seemingly kept losing them games, and then they got some strength and they were able to kind of get some of the good numbers going in that direction. And we've seen the starters have kind of gone up and down. You talked about the injuries. They suffered another one this past weekend. It seems like we haven't been able to get consistency with the starting unit as we have before. And as you mentioned, it doesn't really matter how great you're hitting. If you're right. Giving up a bunch of runs, then it doesn't matter because you'll have to play offensively almost double time as you do defensively. I think the breakdown here of the starters to the bullpen is a significant one.
Yeah, well, when you look at Atlanta, their starters have pitched better. You see they have a winning record. Their ERA should be a little bit higher. 3.23, but their WHIP is low for starters compared to the bullpen. They have one of the most losses in Major League Baseball. So I think when you look at those two things and the fact that 9.4 strikeouts for a bullpen isn't really that high compared to 9.0 for starters. So there's not that big a difference there. And opponent batting average too. You'd like to see the bullpen a little bit lower. Guys specifically that have really struggled: Matzik, Luke Jackson, Kyle Wright, Jesse Chavez allowed 11 earned runs this week.
Right.
You can't have the bullpen doing that. And I think that's really where Atlanta has seen the season get away from them. If they were able to manage that a little bit better, and a lot of teams have that problem. Look, I remember in 2019, every team in the National League East, their bullpen was an absolute disaster. Washington was probably the worst, and they managed to come back and be in 12 games under 500 in May and still win the World Series. There are some people that are convinced Atlanta's not going to make the postseason. I'm not one of them. I still think this is one of the best teams in the National League. And there's an old saying, water rises to its level, and I think Atlanta will too.
Exactly, and you think that with or without Ozuna?
Well, I think they'll get a replacement. The Braves won't sit like this for long.
Yeah.
The Braves are a smart organization. As much as I might have rooted against them my whole life, the Braves are a very good organization. They scout very well. They don't beat themselves, and they usually cover up their weaknesses pretty good.
Exactly. It's a great breakdown of the past week or so, and got kind of a nice little dose about where they should be after those last two series, one against the Mets, one against the Reds. We'll see how they do this week. Have a day off today. They get back in action coming up tomorrow. Well, coming up next here on Overtime, we'll go from pro baseball to college baseball over in Omaha. pair of SEC teams will battle for the national championship. We'll talk about it coming up next.